So APM Help, um, I lead a division called Innovation, and we focus on building products from 0 to 1, 1 to 10. We already have, many hundreds of customers. Actually, I think it's probably over that now in the thousands. And we have this large existing, user base that's already subscribed to our bookkeeping services. And within innovation, we will take an idea, usually from the chief happiness officer, because we don't have a CEO. And
Hold on, you have a chief happiness officer?
we have a chief happiness officer, and he's a great visionary. I mean,
Interesting.
he's got some very, very deep and rooted knowledge in this vertical. So he'll have an idea, and we'll build it over the course of a week, and we'll put some feelers out there and see if we can find a product market fit. And if so, we'll graduate that to the platform engineering team who will maintain it more long term.
Gotcha. So there's this process by which the chief happiness officer comes up with an idea, and then you're able to rapidly prototype. And I assume not everything makes the cut to actual full on engineering.
Yeah, not everything does make the cut. A lot of things don't.
Well, what is the work though? I know that you support property managers with bookkeeping services. Like, what does the software really enable your customers to do?
Within innovation or the existing stuff in platform.
Just broadly within within the company.
So property managers historically, even increasingly so now, are burdened with tons of processes. I mean, it's just absolutely tons they have to do. From a club compliance perspective, they're supposed to be state trust compliant, right? Because they're holding the security deposits of their tenants. Unfortunately, property managers sometimes um, will commingle money by accident, or they'll put money into a bank account where they're actually withdrawing from. But you have to have an accurate ledger, right? The security deposit is protected money. And so a lot of what we do is around that. We have daily bank reconciliations to match up your bank and your software. We have corporate bookkeeping. We have trust bookkeeping. There's just tons we do. Now, the
Okay.
software specifically that we have built enables our large services team, over 200 people, to log into the individual softwares of all these property managers and handle a lot of this burden for them, a ton of it, right? If you're a property manager, you, Cosmo, and you have 2,000 units, right? That's a lot of data. That's a lot you have to deal with. That's a lot of prospective new tenants, right? 10% of that's likely vacancies. That's a lot of bookkeeping. And you don't want to hire somebody in the US if you're cost effective because it's too expensive.
Got it.
Um,
So overall, back office services for people that manage properties, and there's a lot of paperwork and logistics that you support them so that they can stay focused on their business.
Absolutely. Tons of it.
Got it. Okay, cool. And so that makes sense. And I understand that you have been deep in experimenting with AI tools and vibe coding. Like, where's the intersection of that in within your process in supporting these customers?
You know, AI is certainly accelerating, I think, across the board, all over the place. Our adoption of AI is increasing. I try and keep us as agile as possible with respect to quality, of course. And as we lean more and more towards adopting AI tools to augment developers, to speed them up, whether it's a coding assistant to quickly click tab or a more agentic system that's sort of like a Hail Mary in a way, um, it's enabled us in innovation to move remarkably fast. What once took a full week could now take a matter of a day or two with one person. If you have the skill set, of course, to prompt it and watch exactly what it's doing along the way.
Got it. But what exactly are you prototyping with AI? Like, how is
Uh,
it
well,
helping?
a couple things we're working on. One of which is a mobile app. So we have a mobile app written in Flutter for web, iOS, Android. We use some AI there to help generate UI specifically. So it's just very easy to prototype, like super easy for us. It puts the scaffolding in place and allows us to go in and make little niche changes to align it more with the Figma mocks that we receive.
Got
But
it.
it handles a ton of the sort of foundational work for us.
Okay. So, you wrote a blog post, a couple blog posts about
Mm.
the use of AI and its impact on your engineers. And I'd actually love to read a quote to set up this conversation because I think it's really powerful and fascinating.
Okay.
You wrote, it's undeniable that AI coding assistants and other intelligent tools can significantly boost productivity. But let's be candid, there were points in time when I started noticing pull requests that were very obviously filled with AI generated code. Now, that's not inherently a problem. I don't care if a task takes you 5 minutes or 5 hours. The only thing I care about is the outcome. Is the code thoroughly reviewed? Is it optimal? Does it follow our established coding standards and best practices? That's what matters. My concern is that the very ease and efficiency of these tools can, without extreme discipline, lead to a subtle yet significant erosion of core engineering skills. I'm
Mm.
talking about skill atrophy, the dulling of our problem solving muscles when we lean too heavily on automated assistance. It's a classic case of use it or lose it, when the path of least resistance is to let an AI generate the code. The critical thinking and deep understanding that mark a great engineer can begin to fade.
Yeah, tremendous. And I think that's from a post I wrote called The Great Erosion, I believe. And it does talk about very briefly some of the observations I've made. So the engineering team at APM, I think, is 21 people in total. And, you know, like any company, we're obviously optimizing our processes across the board, adopting more rigorous testing, increasing our testing coverage. Well, a lot of developers have this sort of shiny object syndrome in a sense. And it would be wrong to sort of not. Developers are inherently curious people. They're tinkerers, right? And when the hype blows up and there's a coding assistant, terminal based, that can do all of this for you, of course they're going to engage with it. And that did happen. And what I noticed was a tremendous uptick in output, but a decrease in quality. And as I dug deeper into this and I looked at these pull requests and these code commits, I see things that are just obviously not human. And I know that sounds a little bit out there, but just
No.
obviously not human. Like I'm looking at a pull request. I remember one example very vividly, and there's a comment that says something along the lines of "add this to fix the error below." A language model wrote that. No human wrote that, right?
Sure.
And we also have experienced some issues in our um, internal production environments with bugs not being caught. And so it sort of alludes to this eroding of skills which I think is relevant across the board, not just specifically with software engineering. People can develop an over-reliance on something, and it erodes that critical thinking skill that makes a developer who they are, right? It's writing my code for me. I've been using it for a week or so. Now I'm conditioned to trust it more, and, let me just push the code out. Um, there's a problem with that.
So this is a very interesting aspect of the conversation because it's something that I feel and I experience in my own life, whether it's specific to coding or just more broadly my use of AI, where I use it quite frequently for many things, for writing, for just asking personal questions, for coding. And
Mm.
it's I love it, but at the same time, there's this like kind of darker, more cynical aspect of it where I do feel like my brain is not nearly as active as it could or used to be. And I think this is what
Yeah.
you're pointing to in your observation with your own engineers and the people that you're hiring or interviewing for engineering positions, where, yes, it maybe makes code that works, but in the process, you're not practicing the thing that got you hired in the first place. So, like, how big of a problem is this really? Like, it's something that you're concerned about, it's something that I'm concerned about for sure. And we're, roughly like a year into this whole concept of vibe coding being possible. Is this something that you see continuing to become a larger problem, or perhaps it's maybe not as big of an issue as we might realize because just the nature of work itself is going to change?
Hmm. I do believe the nature of work itself is going to mature. It's going to morph in a way into something different, something that I can't right now anticipate fully. It's sort of a blur. It is a problem currently, though, and the trajectory that we're on is something that I've been course correcting. There are guardrails you can put in place to protect against some of this. For example, code will never make it to a production environment unless it goes through your CI/CD process, right? And so if I put in place checks there to test the code, then I can catch a lot of this.
Got it. Well, okay, so you can put in guardrails, and certainly I can see that being helpful, but I don't see that quite addressing the more root of the problem that I hear you talking about, which is this over reliance and ultimate dependence upon AI to do cognitive labor.
Hmm. It's an addiction. How do you treat How do you treat addiction?
Oh boy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I mean, when I launched this podcast in my post, I said, I'm hopelessly addicted, was the first line to vibe coding, is what I was referring to. And
right.
it's fun. Like, I love doing it. I mean, there's a couple aspects to this, right? The world that you're coming from and that you're in is the professional developer software engineer world. For me, I'm adjacent to that. I don't consider myself an engineer. I'm much more of a product designer. Now, have the capability to launch and build my own apps on my own with the support of Claude, ChatGPT, etc. And it's incredibly empowering, and I love it. And that's why, we're here talking on the podcast about vibe coding. Um, but with but there's, I guess, a different expectation, or I suppose naturally you're going to have a different perception of it coming from that world than from me, from my world.
Hmm. There, it is, and modern developers are becoming transcribers rather than architects, in my opinion. And if you like, let's go deeper into this. So, traditional problem solving. When I solve like a coding problem from scratch, I start messy. I might write comments first. I might write comments to say need to validate user input here. I write the simplest possible version that could work. Even if it's insufficient, I'll test it. I console log values to see sort of like what's happening. I refactor, right, and look for edge cases, and then go through that iteration and optimize. But what I'm observing is code that's like emerges fully formed. You know, it's like watching someone sculpt. Um, Michelangelo's David, in a sense, but instead of chiseling away the marble, they're somehow adding like a perfectly formed muscle definition from the start.
I see. Yeah, it appears
Um,
fully formed.
it appears fully formed. It's like building a house on a foundation that
Okay.
you don't know is solid.
So that's an interesting observation. You're
Hmm.
saying that the way that AI writes code is different from how a human writes code because it, in some ways, already knows the answer and it presents the answer to you immediately, which hopefully is is actually what we want. But it seems like also what I'm getting from what you're saying is there's perhaps an opportunity to have AI mimic the way that humans code more closely. It may, or maybe I'm making an assumption if that would even be better or not. I'm not too sure, but it sounds like from what you're describing is when you code, there's this, you start with some ideas, some thoughts, you're experimenting, whereas the AI, there's not really much experimenting. It's like, okay, here's the solution, and then it may or may not work.
Exactly. I mean, exactly. Yeah.
Do you think that AI could be rather, is there an opportunity for AI to more closely mimic the process that humans use to code? Like, would that be a valuable thing?
I think it would be worth experimenting with. I think that, something we haven't done, but we have been talking about doing is optimizing our sort of system prompt across the coding tools that we use to find some standard that we think is most appropriate for what we're doing. And I think in that system prompt, you could influence the model in a way to follow more of the human thought process.
Mm-hmm.
Although it would, I suspect, decrease agility, but it might be for the better. I had talked about in another post of mine somewhere that I've been encouraging engineers to leverage these language models in traditionally unorthodox ways. Everybody talks about you prompt it and it writes the code for you. How about prompt it and ask it about the code, the existing code? Why was something built this way? What is this architecture? What are the edge cases, right? And so,
Yeah,
yeah,
I found it to be tremendous at generating documentation from an existing code base. And that's
mm,
something that would ordinarily take hours, but it can just scan the whole project and produce information about it, which I found to be very useful. I'm curious, like what, like emotionally, with you or with the developers that you work with, what is their response to the availability of these tools? Is it something that they're excited about? Is it something that they're afraid of? Somewhere in between?
somewhere in between. I think there's more hype than not. There are some engineers on the team who will refuse to use AI. I mean, these people, they have every Vim keybind known to man. Like, they're not ever leaving terminal. And there are some who lean more heavily on AI to do things. So it is right now a bit of a mixed emotion, I think.
Got it. And what about you? I mean, are you actively programming anything yourself, or are you using this, or are you just kind of more so managing a team of people that are using AI for coding?
I have used it. I lean on AI when it comes to front end sort of web development, like UI specifically, Tailwind CSS. I can't remember the classes.
Yeah.
That's what I love it for because it's super quick. The back end I write all myself. If you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. And that's just where I'm at currently. But and that is through a CLI, Claude Code CLI. But in terms of editor, I've noticed a lot of migration to Cursor,
Hmm.
the VS Code fork. But
Yeah.
I'm still within VS Code. Everything is customized for me over the course of many years. I won't leave it. Not
Yeah,
now,
I
at
use
least.
Cursor all the time. That's my main thing. So in your blog post, there's this interesting tension that you point out, or that I'm picking up, which is you're both advocating for the use of AI, but then you're also cautioning against certain ways that it's affecting us negatively. So how do you, maybe there's not really an answer here, just is what it is. But like, how do you reconcile these two forces?
There's a middle ground. I think that we should adopt new tools and use them and leverage them to the best of our ability to increase our agility. But I also think you have to have the discipline to know what to do and what not to do.
Hmm.
It's very easy. I mean, just tremendously easy now to just prompt and walk away. You have to be there. Don't, talking about Cloud Code specifically, don't turn on dangerously ignore permissions or whatever it's called. Like
Yeah.
sit there and let it work through the code and ask you questions and prompt it yes, continue, no, update this. There's a ebb and a flow there. It's not so black and white, but you know.
Yeah, I laugh when you say that because I use the dangerously skip permissions. Not all the time, but I have sometimes I have very little patience for it. I want the thing, like for me when I'm making something, I want to see what I have in mind out on the screen as fast as possible. Now, sometimes that's, maybe not the best way to go about things because I have to then backtrack and undo or redo something, but generally it works pretty well. Um,
You know,
but
you know,
yeah, go ahead.
a major concern in all of this is security and compliance. If you think about the potential damage of developers taking code and sending them off to who knows where, whether it's
Hmm.
Claude CLI or OpenAI Codex or Google Gemini or one
Sure.
of the open source tools with a privately hosted model somewhere. There's risk in that. It's very risky. And so when I joined the company, our security compliance was a little bit lax, less of that now. We have
Hmm.
certain policies in place. So one of the first things I did was embrace this sort of emerging um, these code generation tools, create company accounts, and allow developers to use those. So I have the proper enterprise plans with them, code retention and such. We deal with very sensitive data,
Yeah.
like probably, I think millions actually of tenants across the US. Very sensitive data. We can't afford to have that data sent off to who knows where. And so we don't. We have very tough restrictions in place around that.
Good. Yeah, that makes sense. I would imagine, the needs around security are different for me as just like a solo builder making my own fun personal projects versus, a professional company with, dozens or, of engineers and perhaps hundreds of employees.
Yeah.
How do you deal with, I guess, yeah, does the security, are there any like nagging security concerns around using AI for coding or just more broadly?
Um, Top of mind is data retention. Um, we certainly don't want our data retained that we send. Talking specifically about, say, a coding agent through CLI sending over snippets of code, some of which could be very proprietary things, maybe algorithms and such. We don't want that data retained, and we don't want it trained against. And so the enterprise plans we have with Cursor and such um, don't retain data, and they don't train against the data, which is exactly what we want, where we need to be. Um, but there are risks, of course. Something gets out, or somebody uses um, a tool that wasn't sanctioned. Information could get sent off. But I think we've done a pretty good approach. Our developers specifically, we have private profiles on everybody's computer that's only work. There's no personal stuff allowed on there. Like my
Hmm.
background, I was in fintech for a number of years, and I came from very, very strict security and compliance sort of environment where we're SOC 2 compliant. We're talking with auditors multiple times a year. You can't download a VS Code extension unless it was approved and it has gone through a vendor procurement process.
Right.
You couldn't download an application. You can't use a browser that wasn't approved, right? So a lot of that muscle memory I bring over to help secure the org, of course.
Makes sense. So I think this over, we're talking earlier about this over reliance on AI, and I see that it applies to domains beyond just coding. And I'm wondering if you experience this in your own life outside of work and outside of programming.
You said the over reliance
Yeah.
on AI.
Yeah.
I, to me, there is something so satisfying in solving a problem. It's like it's a dopamine hit.
Hmm.
Um, I like to sit there and work through the problem by hand. Now, when it comes to web development specifically, I mentioned I will use AI, and I'm almost at the point where I'm like dangerously skip permissions for front end development. I'm like, just do it. Just give me the UI.
Yeah.
I'll build the back end. But I like to sit there and solve problems. If I am blocked, then I will prompt it and I will say, what are your thoughts on this approach, right? Or how might I solve this? And then I turn it off once I get the answer. I don't let it indulge the rest of my code base. So I'm very specific about it. Personal preference, of course. And I think I move at a much quicker speed than I used to. I probably could move quicker, but it's not always about speed.
Sure.
Um, AI for me is about augmentation, not replacement. It's a collaborative problem solver for complex problems, right? It's a learning accelerator. Why? If you ask questions about implementations and trade-offs, why was something done? It's an analysis tool, code review, security like vulnerability detection, refactoring suggestions. That's what AI is for me. It's a little
Yeah.
different for everybody else, I imagine.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that phrase you mentioned, augmentation, not replacement, is key. I completely
Yeah,
agree with that.
yeah. Mhm.
How do you see the role of the developer or software engineer, and just that profession evolving in the next couple of years?
You know, I see engineering work as becoming a lot more product focused, actually. These are my developing thoughts on the matter. We have a product manager, exceptional guy at APM who has been using OpenAI Codex to realize some of his visions. And he's able to do this all hours of the day. Now,
Hmm.
of course, Codex acts up depending on the complexity of the project if it's too large. But if you build a proper foundation, right, and you add proper testing coverage, Codex has a much easier time navigating the code base and testing itself to make sure what it did didn't cause any regressions or whatnot. So the developers can aid product by doing these things. And I suspect with um, the more mature models that are released that have better comprehension and intelligence will produce better results for products specifically. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I have limited experience with Codex, but I like the way in which non engineers can leverage it in the way that you're describing. That's really cool. I want to move on to you also have this app and company called Stop the Scam. Can you tell us a little bit about
Mm.
what that is and your inspiration for it?
Where did you dig that up at? I
on your
built that.
on your LinkedIn?
Oh, my LinkedIn. I built it years ago. Um, no, not that many years, a couple of years ago, though. One day I was over at my grandparents' house and they're getting messages on Facebook that are obviously scammers. They're getting text messages that are obviously like just junk stuff. But the text messages are designed in a way to trick people. Like if you have that sort of mental aptitude, that's junk. And if you don't, they've got you. So they're designed to look bizarre, right? The spelling's all messed up. Like it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I said, I went on Twitch actually, and I found a guy streaming. Kit Boga is his name. He was doing such a thing as scam baiting, where he will engage in the text. He'll call the number. He'll pretend like he's an elderly person and waste their time. Right?
I've seen
Very,
those.
very noble. And I said, I could write some software to do this. I could do it. And so I set out over the course of a year or so and built a series of tools, a Chrome extension, a mobile app, a web app, and it's sort of an ecosystem of products. And I try to cover as many touch points as I can to prevent the user from being scammed. So, for example, the Chrome extension, when an elderly person or whoever uses it actually navigates to a website, it will tell you this website is 10 days old. It's probably not actually Amazon.com. You're on Amazon spelled weirdly.com, right? It was purchased 10 days ago. The mobile app specifically I called Vision because when I built this, it used computer vision. Had a program for the desktop. There was no concept, I don't think, at the time, or at least I hadn't heard of it, retrieval augmented generation. But what the mobile app would allow you to do is not only talk to it, this is back when we had Text Da Vinci from OpenAI, right? There was no like bi-directional chat interface. It was just really wonky. So you could send a message and say, I just received a voicemail and it's the IRS and they want gift cards. It will tell you that's junk. You could send it a message that you received, say through Facebook, and it will tell you whether or not it believes it's junk. If the message includes a website or phone number, it'll look up both of those things and tell you probably junk. The number is a VoIP number. The website is 3 days old. This is not actually the Social Security Administration messaging you on Facebook. And it's sort of a nonprofit. I never charged anything for it. Um, I was fortunate enough to have been recognized here in Charleston, South Carolina, so had a little bit of publicity on the TV. And it does protect people, although it's on cruise control right now. I
I
haven't pushed
see.
an update to it in a while. Yeah,
Got
that
it.
was a bit.
So yeah, okay. So the concept is, you're helping people not fall prey to scams, and using AI for that. The interesting thing here is AI is also enabling, on the other hand, increasingly sophisticated scams, right? With voice
Oh yeah,
cloning technology, and of course with video generation, image generation. It's gotten so good in the past couple of years where you know you can produce media that looks essentially real, but it's not. So, like, how do you see scams evolving with AI?
it's extremely dangerous. You know, in the same tech I'm using to protect people, scammers are using to target people. It's just the other side of the same coin in a way.
Yeah,
I talked with the city of Charleston about this, their Department of Aging, and we had a very interesting discussion, several actually. One of the things that I built for them to try and thwart this was it's a phone number that you call, you talk with a language model, bi-directional, you have a conversation, and you can ask it any question about what you might be going through. And it always errs on the side of caution, but people are using it. Seniors are calling it, and they're asking these really interesting questions. I have prepared some material, and the Department of Aging in Charleston, they go around and hold presentations at different communities, senior centers, and such, where they will talk about some of these things. When you receive a phone call, you can't trust it. It could be spoofed. You got to call the number back, right? Talk about voice changes and such. So we're making efforts, and I'm always hopeful.
yeah. There's some obvious things I think most people listening or watching are aware of. Don't click on links from random emails or text messages. But in your course of building this product and in researching like how people are getting scammed, is there anything that you might recommend or like any like non-obvious um, pieces of advice to avoid some of the more sophisticated scams?
There's so many touch points nowadays, and there's so much you have to watch out for. It's like you have to wake up cautious at this point. Um, like you pick up your phone and what you're saying might not be real. You know, could have been like a firmware attack or something. So always err on the side of caution. And if you think about what you most frequently use, the computer, which is the terminal you use to access the internet, the phone, which does the same thing, there are certain things you can put in place, like iOS specifically, disable unknown callers. For the computer, install a good antivirus. Use Avast, or I think Norton's come up in the world a little bit over the past couple of years. These have pretty good, not only antivirus, but they offer cybersecurity protection as well. And they do a pretty good job.
Yeah, this is more on the spam side of things, but have you seen how iOS 26 now has message filtering? So not everything will appear in that main chat window.
I haven't. I have not seen that.
Yeah, super useful. I love it. I'm on the beta right now, so it's just something that I'm uh aware of where you get those like spam messages from politicians or
Oh yeah,
whatever, like
yeah.
Best Buy, whatever, like fake product purchases. They will now go to like a separate folder outside of the main one, which I'm very happy about because I'm so tired of getting all that junk into my text messages.
I think I have that set up. I think there was a more primitive version of that before the latest iOS that has some filtering capacity. And Vision, the app that I built, actually leverages. Um, I use OpenAI's text embeddings to classify incoming text messages as junk.
Oh, cool. Okay, so
So that
you've tackled your own version of that.
yeah, yeah, a while ago.
Okay.
Apple, the iOS operating system allows for some ability to filter messages in phone calls, although it's a pretty restricted ecosystem.
Hmm. So one thing I noticed, sort of on on a different note, is you're a classical violinist.
Yes,
Is
it's
that
been
something?
years.
Okay, not you don't do you practice at all?
It's been 10. I played for 10 years,
Okay.
and the computer turned me into a recluse. I mean, it was just the. I don't know how it happened really, but I stopped playing one day, and next thing you know, I was on the computer 24/7.
Wow. So, okay, maybe you're not so active right now, but you do have significant experience playing music. And I want to ask you about your thoughts on AI's impact regarding music creation and what it means to be an artist.
Hmm, there's a lot there to unpack. Um, my thoughts are still developing as it relates to this. I like the freedom of expression. I like the intuition and unique experiences that humans bring along with the composition and the music that they play. I think there's a uniqueness. There's definitely something human about it that resonates with me. I haven't really heard any AI generated music that I like yet.
Mm.
Um, yet. I'm open to listening to music if it's AI generated, but I'm not sort of at the point.
Yeah. It's an area that I haven't explored much myself. I've played around with Suno a little bit. Have you tried that one?
Yes, yep, I have tried that. Yep.
I mean, I hear that it's gotten very good, and it is quite cool. For people that aren't aware, Suno is one of the more popular music AI generated music platforms. You can put in a prompt and it'll make you a song. It'll generate the lyrics, and it's quite flexible in terms of the genre and to what degree you can add your own lyrics versus have it generate the lyrics for you. And it sounds pretty good, but you make a good point, which is like, well, like who really wants to listen to this, right? And maybe that's like an aesthetic preference. I'm curious, like
You know,
why, like
I've seen music and audio generation being more applied in game development,
okay, yeah,
indie developers specifically who maybe lack the budget for a real audio track, and now you don't have to make up something goofy using some open source software. You can just generate it, right? And it plugs into what they're building pretty well, pretty good. I mean, you probably wouldn't know, depending on what how they generated it. It'd be very difficult to tell the difference. Like the production quality is there for certain
Hmm.
soundtracks.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, the use case of generative music for games makes a lot of sense, but I don't see. So I don't really. I've never really played instruments, and I love music. I have an interest in learning how to make my own music, and I don't
Mm.
see AI ever replacing the feeling of what it's like to play the violin or play a physical instrument. I mean, maybe it can synthesize those sounds, but it's not going to ever replace the emotions and the satisfaction that you get from doing it yourself.
No, it's not. It's not going to. I don't suspect it will. There will always be um, the sort of thrill and experience of doing it yourself.
Hmm.
Um, but I am concerned that from a cost perspective, industries might be leaning more into the sort of generation of audio in these soundtracks as a viable replacement to whatever they're using it for.
Yeah, and I think about that more broadly, not just with music, but with other creative domains. I think a lot
Mm.
about generative imagery in video, where it's gotten so good now with just a prompt, you can make these just stunning images, and to a lesser degree video, but it's catching up quite quickly. And I think about, I mean, it's a fact today, but increasingly so into the future, where kids growing up have these tools. And on the one hand, they're really exciting and cool. The fact that we can just immediately produce these types of outputs. But I often wonder about how much kids are going to lack an interest in learning to draw themselves, by hand. Or,
Yeah.
another like more personal example for me, I had a period where I was learning Blender, and I thought I think Blender is an incredible tool, and I found it to be the most intuitive 3D software. But right now, it's like I look at what's possible with generative video, and I think, what's the point of learning Blender or any 3D tool when I can just produce it almost effortlessly without having to make the model, texture it, set up the lighting. There's enormous complexity in that modality, and the AI, is not is far from perfect. You know, when you compare it to the control that you have with Blender, but I don't know. Is this something that you think about or that you worry about at all?
I do. Um, I think that AI has a great potential to erode the experience of being human in a way. And I worry about kids growing up and not having the same experiences that we had or the same interests that we had because they see something far greater, or at least that's how they perceive it. And so why put in the effort when to learn that at a very low level when at a very high level I could just prompt it. And speaking about Blender specifically, I never really got into Blender, but I have played around with it a few times. I recently installed an MCP server community made for Blender. It launched Blender. It was like dragging objects. It was building exactly what I wanted, which was a little person and then a home. I was stunned. I was stunned.
That's awesome. Yeah, I have not. I've seen videos of that, but I've not messed around with that myself.
Yeah.
You mentioned it's changing what it means to be human, and or rather that the challenge is like how to retain our humanity throughout this paradigm shift as more of our tools and the economy start to become or yeah become more enmeshed with machine learning. It seems like it's really just taking over everything, and maybe that taking over is not quite the right word. It's like more so being infused into
Yeah.
our tools. And there's like a part of me that's kind of a little bit fearful and like cynical about that. But then I also think like we think about this from like today's perspective,
Mm.
and it's hard to know what our psychology will look like 10 years from now once these tools or once AI evolves to whatever it looks like at that point. And perhaps from that perspective, we'll see things from a different light. And maybe there's room to be more optimistic in that it is changing what it means to be human, maybe more for like the positive side of things, where our like the hope, the dream has been that is that, or for me, that AI will give us more time to explore life in a more creative sense. And yeah, free us from the drudgery of manual labor. But then I also think, okay, well, the counter to that is maybe sometimes the manual labor is what makes life fun and worth living. So it's a very complex subject to me.
It is very complex. You know, slight deviation. Within APM, we've been experimenting with humanoid robotics. And I know you're thinking, how does tech-enabled property management services translate to humanoid robotics? And the truth is, property managers have tons of problems, tons. Tenants have problems, owners have problems. They all fall within the vertical that we're targeting. And we recently, I have a humanoid robot. Maybe I can show it to you sometime. And
Yeah,
I've been programming it. It's one from Unitree G1 EDU,
nice.
experimental. Um, I've been programming it, and what I'd like to do next is I'm going to hook up Claude or GPT-4, or maybe 5 will come out by the time I get around to this. And I'm going to create tools for the different functions of the robot. And I'm going to prompt it, Claude, wake up. And I'm going to see what happens. Who
Well, I am very
knows?
curious. How are you imagining the opportunities within property management for humanoids?
There's a couple of use cases. One for now is definitely a receptionist handling queries. We have all the data inside the softwares. And so what all we need is sort of a physical presence. We already have a digital receptionist that we just are plugging into the robot. Also, sort of I don't know if it's called last mile, more like last couple 100 foot package delivery,
Mm-hmm.
where all packages aggregate in a central mailroom, taking those and then walking them to the individual units. Just a handful of things.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I was immediately thinking about like repairs within the property. That's
Mm.
certainly a much more complex type of task compared to being a receptionist, but that's just what I was visualizing when you first said it.
One of the things that is we're working on inside of our app for property managers is a video analysis where it will take a video that the PM records and it will look for damage. And it actually works surprisingly well. For example, I'm walking around a unit and taking a video. This is a real example. And I'm opening up the cabinets in the kitchen. I process the video at the end and it tells me 80% confidence there's a leak under the sink because it detected a bucket. And the inside of the bucket looked a little bit worn, like it had been used to being filled up with water. And it said, it found all these details. And it's like, there might be a leak under the sink. You should check that out.
Wow.
Very
That
powerful.
sounds super useful. So you're saying that you, from just a video of someone walking through an apartment, you can detect particular issues?
Well, yeah, you could just walk through, but I'm talking specifically about a move out inspection.
Okay.
Conducted
Right.
by the PM or the tenant, and so we are looking for problems.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, we've had very good success with that so far.
That makes sense. That sounds super useful. Because what typically, without something like that, you need to go in person, but that doesn't seem like that, you know, hard of a thing to do to go check it out in person necessarily.
Well, it depends. If you have 2,000 units
Okay.
or potentially more, and maybe you're fatigued that day, you don't exactly know what you're looking for. Maybe you're a novice hired by the property manager to go around and do this,
Hmm.
right? Then the videos make sense. Um, yeah, it's interesting, and it's something we're exploring. Um, but I'll keep you posted.
Hmm. Sounds super interesting. Um, okay. I think this is probably a good chance to wrap up. Is there anything else that you want to share on, your thoughts on vibe coding or, anything of that matter?
You know, I think as sort of a final closing thought, it would be don't be nervous to embrace AI, but make sure that along with your curiosity, you bring enough discipline to know when to stop.
Mm,
Because the last thing you want to do is erode anything that makes you unique.
well said. Where can people learn more about your company or, the work that you do?
APMHelp.com, the best place to go. And if you know a property manager, even better. Send them our way.
Wonderful. Well, Robert, thank you so much for joining us here on Vibe Coding. This has been a really fascinating conversation touching on everything related to property management, to creativity. If you want to learn more and listen to more episodes of this podcast, you can go to vibe-coding.fm and there's a whole community resources hub for you to check out there. We'll see you next time.